Hi, my name is Nick Williams, and was mentioned, I'm currently a student at OU Law, and I'm also a musician. And so whenever people ask me what it is that I do, I usually like to color in the answer by saying, I live a pretty Bruce Wayne Batman lifestyle. Law student by day, musician by night. And it may seem like these two worlds really don't have much to do with each other, but it's actually the blending of them that gave rise to the idea that led me to this stage today. You see, studying the law and its development is basically a constant assessment of perspectives different from your own. You're only able to really understand what you think and what you believe on certain issues when you analyze them from different perspectives, when you realize where you're not. And you're only able to understand the strength and the substance of your beliefs when you place them alongside others. And music actually offers a pretty similar opportunity in a lot of ways. Music's been called the one universal language that we have, the one form of communication that we just inherently know simply by being human. And I started thinking about that in regards to the context of all these perspectives that the law tries to incorporate. And I started wondering whether music, given its inherent universal thread between all of us, whether it offers the opportunity for our shrinking and diversifying world to best live in harmony with itself. Because it seems like finding a harmony between different people and different groups is more imperative today than ever. Today, when agreeing on a set of facts seems to be more difficult than what finding them out in the first place used to be centuries ago. And it all reminds me of this statement that Krista Tippett, the radio broadcaster, once said in an interview. She said that, I can disagree with your opinion, but it turns out that I can't disagree with your experience. And so I think music offers a really promising opportunity in a lot of ways in this respect. And this is because of three main patterns that I saw through looking deeper on the subject. And the first is that music offers an expression of a feeling and experience for people, and also an ability within the listener to understand that. Music has developed to be a means of communication between people. That much has always been understood. But what's even more interesting is that there's actually a lot of scientific research that explains why that is. Psychologists have recently been able to document via cerebral scans how music triggers parts of the brain that are most responsible for empathy and understanding the motives behind people. And also, music has been documented to release oxytocin in the brain, which is a chemical that plays a vital role in the bonding and trusting processes between people. So with this in mind, I started wondering whether there were certain kinds of songs that best represent this expressing and understanding between people. And this is one of the first ones that I came across. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? And how many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? And how many roads the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Blowing in the Wind was written by Bob Dylan and is perhaps the most emblematic song of the folk movement. This movement that put the concerns and the feelings of many rural Americans on the forefront of the nation's consciousness for one of the first times. An interesting fact about Bob Dylan is that he was most influenced and most idolized an Oklahoma native, a man by the name of Woody Guthrie. And Woody Guthrie was a man who lived through both the Great Depression as well as the Dust Bowl of Oklahoma. And it's probably the first known folk singer-songwriter that gave an expression to rural Americans uniquely their own. And so when I sit down and listen to Bob Dylan's music, especially his folk tunes, I can hear the dusty roots and the struggles of the earlier man that gave this form of expression to experiences that I myself never have endured, but can nonetheless understand through his songs that he wrote and also inspired another artist. And other songs that represent this expressing and understanding between people include White Christmas, the classic Bing Crosby tune, that really resonated with American World War II soldiers, these men and women who were dispersed across the globe who were longing for home. and longing for a more peaceful world that they were fighting for. As well as What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, which is this tune that gave a new accessible voice to many inner-city Americans who had felt marginalized leading up to the civil rights era in which the tune came out. Now, the second pattern that I found within looking deeper on music's ability to connect people is how music naturally blends cultures. This guitar itself is a representation of that, with its wood and steel string from different parts of the world, as well as a few cracks that the rushed lifestyle of a millennial like myself could inflict upon it. But artists have taken this kind of instrument, and which has typically been identified with Western society, but utilized it to give voice to experiences and stories from all across the globe. And on the topic of different parts of the globe, perhaps no band is better known than knitting together diverse cultures than the act behind this next song.
Words are flowing off like endless rain into a paper cup. They slither while they pass, they slip away across the universe. Pools of sorrow, waves of joy are drifting through my open mind, possessing and caressing me. Jackaroo Deva. Oh, nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change my world.
That song, Across the Universe, was written by probably the biggest act in Western society, the Beatles. And the chorus line there, Jack Garudeva, is actually a Sanskrit phrase that means glory to the shining remover of darkness, which really helps me understand the chorus line, the next line, nothing's going to change my world, because the first time that I listened to that song, especially coming from a Western mindset, it gave me this feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness. But actually taking that line into consideration with the other song's lyrics and context, I think what John Lennon was referencing was that unchangeable, unending light that dwells within him, and that dwells within each of us. Now, the Beatles released that song during their experiences of Asian and Indian culture, which played a part in the influx of those cultures within our own American way of being. And just looking around the heartland of America here, you can find yoga centers and lessons sprinkled throughout. And actually, Oklahoma may be the one place that you'll find a guy with a trucker hat walking outside of a yoga center. And another interesting dinner party fact about that song is that it was actually broadcast into space on the coinciding anniversary of NASA's founding, as well as the song's recording. I guess broadcast into space just in case we may encounter a different group of beings that we need to form some sort of social connection with. But other artists that have been doing this weaving of diverse cultures together include Coldplay, the massive band that's been known to incorporate healthy doses of Japanese and Indian culture within their songs, like Lovers in Japan or Charlie Brown. And another artist that's recently intrigued me is a man by the name of Ibrahim Malouf, who's a jazz artist from Beirut who, interestingly enough, utilizes classical Western instruments to give voice to distinctly Middle Eastern-sounding music that he grew up with. And also Justin Hurwitz, who was the composer for the blockbuster hit and 3-second Oscar-winning best film La La Land. He really invigorated and brought some new life into old jazz tunes that my grandparents grew up with and fell in love listening to and dancing with. Which leads me to my last pattern that I found within looking deeper into this, and it's how music offers itself for a narrative and moving a narrative and story forward that brings people together. Music was designed not solely to be a singular experience, but also to be an engagement of people and between people. And no genre really exemplifies this, in my opinion, better than a genre that's typically been most loved of older generations like my parents and my grandparents, until recently as it's seen this resurgence of interest in my generation and younger generations, and that's the genre of musicals. And songs within musicals are explicitly made to move a story forward, which gives them this really interesting explanatory and descriptive lyrical structure. And new works like Hamilton, which paints a portrait of one of our founding fathers, and Waitress, which tells the story of a struggling waitress fighting for meaning in her life. They're really doing this interesting bridging of the gap, generation-wise, between the older and the newer. And the next song that I'm going to play comes from one of the more recent hits on Broadway that tells the story of just a young kid struggling through anxiety and the other trials that many of our younger teenagers are dealing with growing up in today's society.
I've learned to slam on the brake before I even turn the key, before I make the mistake, before I lead with the worst of me. Give them no reason to stare, no slipping up if you slip away. So I've got nothing to share, no, I've got nothing to say. Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. Step out of the sun because you've learned, because you've learned. On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I've always been? 'Cause I'm tapping on the glass, I'm waving through a window. Oh, I try to speak, but nobody can hear. So I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass. I'm waving through a window. Oh, can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me?
That song came from the musical Dear Evan Hansen, as you see, and is this perfect example of how songs offer themselves up to stories. Stories that can touch anyone from any part of life and any point on the globe. And so, really my takeaway for you all today is really just to have an awareness of the music that you're listening to and be aware of these three abilities within music, that how they're able to express and convey understanding between people. And also how music naturally blends cultures and thus blends different people together. And finally, how music offers itself up to stories that, as humans, we're inherently drawn to. And also, one final thing is really just a call to have a heightened awareness of the music that you're listening to. Listen deeper to the songs that you're listening to. Be more inquisitive about the tunes that you put on. I wonder why those songs came to be and what kind of other artistic influences gave rise to them. And follow those a little bit further. Put on a tune that you wouldn't normally listen to. It might not only lead to a better understanding of people very different from yourself, but also give you a better understanding of who you are and where you fit alongside them. Thanks for listening.